In the summer of 2015, three identical triplets from Billings, Montana, decided to celebrate their 22nd birthday with an adventure that would take them deep into the Glacier National Park wilderness. Jake, Luke, and Cole Brennan had been inseparable since birth, sharing not just identical faces but an unbreakable bond that made them local celebrities in their small hometown. The brothers worked together at their father's auto repair shop, lived in the same apartment complex, and rarely spent more than a few hours apart. Their plan was simple: a 5-day camping trip in the remote Blackfoot Valley, where they could fish, hike, and escape the summer heat that had been baking Montana for weeks. On July 15, 2015, the triplets loaded their silver Ford pickup truck with camping gear, fishing equipment, and enough food for a week. Their mother, Linda Brennan, watched from the front porch as her sons prepared to leave. According to neighbors, she seemed unusually worried that morning, asking the boys multiple times if they had their emergency radio and enough water. Jake, the unofficial leader of the three, assured her they were prepared for anything. He had been planning this trip for months, studying topographic maps and weather reports. The brothers had camped in these mountains since they were teenagers and they knew the terrain well. The last confirmed sighting of the Brennan triplets was at Murphy's General Store in West Glacier at 2:30 in the afternoon. Store owner Bill Murphy later told investigators that the three young men seemed excited and well prepared. They purchased additional batteries for their flashlights, extra fishing line, and a bag of ice for their cooler. Murphy remembered them joking about who would catch the biggest trout, each brother claiming he had the best fishing skills. They paid in cash, left no receipt, and drove north toward the Blackfoot Valley access road. Their planned campsite was located near Hidden Lake, a remote spot accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through dense pine forests for nearly 8 miles. The area was known for its pristine fishing and complete isolation from cell phone towers and main hiking trails. Park rangers rarely patrolled the region during weekdays, making it perfect for visitors seeking solitude. The brothers had camped there twice before and were familiar with the challenging terrain and unpredictable weather patterns that could develop quickly in the high country. When the triplets failed to return home on July 20th as scheduled, their parents initially assumed they had decided to extend their trip. The brothers were adults, responsible, and had occasionally stayed longer than planned on previous camping adventures. However, when July 21st passed without any contact, Linda Brennan called the Flathead County Sheriff's Office. Her sons had never gone more than 2 days without calling home, and their silence was completely out of character. Sheriff David Walsh assigned Deputy Rebecca Stone to investigate the missing persons report. Stone, a 10-year veteran with extensive experience in wilderness search and rescue operations, immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. 3 people disappearing simultaneously in the Montana wilderness was extremely unusual, especially when they were experienced outdoorsmen familiar with the area. She organized a preliminary search team and headed to the Blackfoot Valley that same afternoon. The triplets' pickup truck was discovered exactly where they had planned to park it, in a small clearing near the trailhead leading to Hidden Lake. The vehicle was unlocked, with the keys sitting on the dashboard. Inside, investigators found the brothers' wallets, containing their identification cards and a total of $340 in cash. Their cell phones were in the glove compartment, all showing dead batteries. The truck appeared undisturbed, with no signs of struggle or forced entry. Personal items were neatly arranged in the cab, suggesting the brothers had simply parked and walked away. Deputy Stone noted that the truck's position indicated careful planning. It was parked in shade, away from the main road, and positioned for easy departure. The brothers had clearly intended to return to this exact spot. Tire tracks in the soft dirt showed no other vehicles had been in the area recently, ruling out the possibility of an encounter with other campers or potential threats. The initial search began immediately, focusing on the 3-mile trail between the parking area and Hidden Lake. A team of 6 rangers and volunteers spread out along the path, looking for any sign of the missing men. The trail was well-defined but challenging, winding through rocky terrain and crossing 2 small streams. Search dogs were brought in from Kalispell, and they quickly picked up the scent trail leading toward the lake. About halfway to Hidden Lake, the search team discovered the first piece of evidence. A blue baseball cap bearing the logo of the Brennan family auto shop was found hanging on a low pine branch beside the trail. The cap belonged to Cole, the youngest of the triplets, by 7 minutes. It appeared to have been placed deliberately rather than lost accidentally, as if someone had hung it there as a marker. The fabric showed no signs of damage or struggle. As the search continued toward Hidden Lake, the dogs suddenly lost the scent trail near a rocky outcropping overlooking a steep ravine. The area was searched thoroughly, but no additional evidence was found. The scent simply vanished as if the 3 men had disappeared into thin air. This puzzled the experienced search team, as scent trails typically fade gradually rather than ending abruptly. The search expanded over the following days, with additional teams arriving from surrounding counties. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the vast wilderness area, while ground teams explored every trail, creek bed, and potential camping spot within a 10-mile radius. The Montana National Guard provided additional aircraft and personnel, turning the operation into one of the largest search efforts in the state's recent history. Despite the massive effort, no trace of the Brennan triplets was found. No camping equipment, no footprints beyond the point where the scent trail ended, no disturbed vegetation indicating someone had left the established trails. The search area included treacherous terrain with hidden crevices, swift-moving streams, and dense forest that could easily conceal evidence. However, the complete absence of any trace was unusual even for such challenging conditions. After 2 weeks of intensive searching, the official operation was scaled back to periodic helicopter flights and volunteer ground teams. The case remained active, but resources were redirected to other emergencies. The Brennan family refused to give up hope, organizing their own search parties and posting flyers throughout the region. Local media covered the story extensively, and the mysterious disappearance of 3 identical brothers captured public attention across Montana and neighboring states. The investigation revealed no evidence of foul play, no financial problems, no relationship issues, and no reason the brothers would voluntarily disappear. Their bank accounts remained untouched, their social media profiles showed no unusual activity before the trip, and interviews with friends and co-workers revealed nothing suspicious. The triplets had been looking forward to their camping adventure and had made plans for the following weekend that they seemed excited to keep. As summer turned to fall, the case grew cold. The Brennan family held a memorial service in October, though they refused to declare their sons dead. Linda Brennan continued to believe her boys were alive somewhere, possibly injured and unable to return home. She kept their apartment exactly as they had left it, paying rent month after month in case they came back. The auto repair shop remained closed, with a sign in the window reading, "Gone fishing, back soon," that became a local landmark and a reminder of the unsolved mystery. Winter snow covered the Blackfoot Valley, making further ground searches impossible until spring. The case file grew thick with reports, witness statements, and search records, but no new leads emerged. The Brennan triplets had simply vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a family that refused to stop hoping for answers. The spring of 2016 brought renewed hope to the Brennan family as the snow melted and revealed the Montana wilderness once again. Linda Brennan had spent the winter months organizing volunteer search groups and studying every map of the Glacier National Park region. She had convinced herself that her sons were alive somewhere, perhaps injured and sheltering in a cave or abandoned cabin, waiting for rescue. Her husband, Tom Brennan, supported her efforts while privately struggling with the growing certainty that their boys were gone forever. Deputy Rebecca Stone reopened the active search in May 2016, coordinating with park rangers and volunteer organizations. The winter had been harsh, with record snowfall that could have covered evidence or shifted the landscape. Stone hoped that melting snow might reveal clues that had been hidden during the previous year's search efforts. New teams were organized, including experienced mountaineers and cave rescue specialists who could access areas that had been deemed too dangerous during the initial search. The renewed search efforts focused on areas that had been inaccessible during winter months. Teams explored high-altitude regions, remote valleys, and cave systems that dotted the mountainous terrain. Advanced ground-penetrating radar was brought in to scan areas where the brothers might have fallen through thin ice or become trapped under rock slides. Every piece of technology available to search and rescue operations was deployed in the hope of finding some trace of the missing triplets. During the second week of the spring search, volunteers discovered what appeared to be a piece of camping equipment near a remote creek about 4 miles from where the scent trail had ended. The item was a damaged camping stove, partially buried under fallen logs and debris from winter storms. The stove was sent to the state crime lab for analysis, but results showed it had been in the wilderness for several years and was not connected to the Brennan brothers' disappearance. As weeks passed without significant discoveries, the search teams began to encounter the same frustrating pattern that had emerged the previous summer. Despite covering hundreds of square miles of wilderness, no definitive evidence of the triplets' fate could be found. The terrain was vast and unforgiving, with countless places where 3 men could have encountered trouble. Swift rivers, unstable rock formations, and sudden weather changes all posed potential dangers to even experienced outdoorsmen. The media attention that had initially focused on the case began to fade as other stories captured public interest. However, the Brennan family's determination never wavered. Linda Brennan appeared on local television programs, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. She offered a reward of $25,000 for information leading to her son's location, money the family had raised by selling their house and moving into a smaller apartment. Tom Brennan returned to work at the auto repair shop, keeping it open as a tribute to his sons and a beacon of hope for their return. Customers often stopped by not for repairs but to offer support and share their own theories about what might have happened to the triplets. The shop became an unofficial headquarters for ongoing search efforts, with maps covering the walls and volunteer schedules posted near the cash register. Throughout 2016 and into 2017, periodic searches continued whenever weather conditions permitted. Hiking groups and hunting parties were asked to keep watch for any signs of the missing men or their equipment. The case remained in the public consciousness, particularly among outdoor enthusiasts who understood how easily someone could disappear in Montana's vast wilderness areas. Professional search and rescue experts began to develop theories about what might have happened to the Brennan triplets. Some suggested they had encountered a sudden weather event, such as a flash flood or unexpected snowstorm, that had forced them to seek shelter in an area where they couldn't be easily found. Others theorized that they might have fallen into one of the region's many hidden crevices or underground cave systems. The most troubling theory, though rarely discussed openly, was that the brothers had encountered someone with malicious intent. While the area was remote, it wasn't completely isolated from human activity. Illegal hunting, drug operations, or simply someone who didn't want to be discovered could have posed a threat to the triplets. However, no evidence supported this theory, and the brothers' peaceful nature made violent confrontation seem unlikely. As 2017 progressed, the official search efforts were reduced to occasional helicopter flights and requests for hikers to report any unusual findings. The case remained open, but active investigation had essentially ceased. The Brennan family continued their private search efforts, often spending weekends in the wilderness, calling their sons names and hoping for some sign that they were still alive. Linda Brennan's health began to deteriorate under the stress of not knowing her son's fate. She developed insomnia and anxiety, spending sleepless nights studying satellite images of the search area on her computer. Her friends and family worried about her obsessive behavior, but she insisted that giving up the search would mean abandoning her boys when they needed her most. The second anniversary of the disappearance passed quietly in July 2017. A small memorial service was held at the trailhead where the brothers had begun their final hike. Family members, friends, and volunteers gathered to remember Jake, Luke, and Cole Brennan and to renew their commitment to finding answers. Flowers were placed at the base of a pine tree, and Linda Brennan read a letter she had written to her sons, promising never to stop looking for them. By the fall of 2017, even the most optimistic supporters began to acknowledge that the chances of finding the triplets alive were virtually non-existent. However, the family's need for closure remained as strong as ever. Not knowing what had happened to their sons was a torture that prevented them from properly grieving and moving forward with their lives. The case had become one of Montana's most puzzling missing persons mysteries. Law enforcement officials privately admitted they had exhausted all conventional search methods and investigative techniques. The complete absence of evidence was itself a clue, suggesting that whatever had happened to the Brennan brothers had occurred in a location so remote or well concealed that traditional search methods couldn't reach it. Local newspapers occasionally revisited the story, particularly during the summer months when outdoor activities increased and the possibility of new discoveries seemed more likely. The Brennan triplets had become part of local folklore, a cautionary tale about the dangers of wilderness camping and a reminder of how quickly people could vanish without a trace in Montana's vast landscapes. As winter approached in 2017, the Brennan family faced their third Christmas without knowing the fate of their sons. The auto repair shop remained open, though business had declined as Tom Brennan struggled to maintain his focus on work. The apartment the triplets had shared remained exactly as they had left it, a shrine to three young men whose fate remained one of Montana's greatest unsolved mysteries. The winter of 2017 passed slowly for the Brennan family, each day bringing the same crushing uncertainty that had defined their lives for over 2 years. Linda Brennan had developed a routine of checking missing persons websites and social media groups dedicated to finding lost hikers. She corresponded with families across the country who faced similar situations, sharing theories and offering support while desperately hoping someone might have information about her sons. In March 2018, an unexpected development breathed new life into the case. A technology company based in Seattle had been developing advanced drone systems for search and rescue operations, and they approached the Flathead County Sheriff's Office about using the Brennan case as a test for their new equipment. The drones were equipped with high-resolution cameras, thermal imaging sensors, and artificial intelligence software that could identify unusual patterns or objects in wilderness areas. Deputy Rebecca Stone, who had never stopped thinking about the missing triplets, immediately saw the potential of this new technology. The drones could access areas that were too dangerous or remote for ground teams, and their advanced sensors might detect evidence that human searchers had missed. She convinced Sheriff Walsh to approve the experimental search operation, despite budget constraints and skepticism from some department members. The drone search was scheduled for late April 2018, when weather conditions would be optimal and snow coverage minimal. The technology company provided 3 state-of-the-art drones and 2 operators who had experience in search and rescue missions. The plan was to conduct systematic flights over a 50-square-mile area, focusing on regions that had been difficult to search thoroughly during previous ground operations. Linda Brennan was cautiously optimistic about the drone search, though 3 years of disappointment had taught her to temper her expectations. She and Tom drove to the command post that had been established near the original search area, bringing coffee and sandwiches for the search team. Watching the sleek drones prepare for flight, she allowed herself to hope that technology might finally provide the answers that human effort had failed to deliver. The first day of drone operations covered familiar territory, retracing the path the triplets had taken toward Hidden Lake and expanding outward in careful grid patterns. The high-resolution cameras captured thousands of images, which were immediately analyzed by computer software designed to identify anything that didn't belong in the natural environment. Hours passed without significant discoveries, though the detailed footage provided the most comprehensive view of the search area that investigators had ever possessed. On the second day, the drone operators expanded their search to include areas that had been considered too remote or inaccessible during previous efforts. One drone was equipped with specialized sensors that could detect metal objects buried under vegetation or debris. The operators worked methodically, flying predetermined routes while the artificial intelligence software processed the incoming data in real time. At approximately 2:15 in the afternoon, one of the drones detected an anomaly in a heavily forested area nearly 6 miles from the original search zone. The thermal imaging showed a geometric pattern that didn't match the natural landscape, suggesting the presence of man-made objects. The drone descended for a closer look, its cameras focusing on what appeared to be fabric partially concealed beneath fallen branches and accumulated forest debris. The discovery was immediately reported to the command post, where Deputy Stone and the Brennan family watched the live video feed with growing excitement and apprehension. The drone's cameras revealed what appeared to be the corner of a tent, its blue fabric barely visible through the natural camouflage of fallen logs and pine needles. The location was in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest, accessible only by hiking through extremely difficult terrain. Within hours, a ground team was organized to reach the site identified by the drone. The hike required specialized equipment and experienced mountaineers, as the terrain included steep slopes, unstable rock formations, and thick vegetation that had to be carefully navigated. The team included Deputy Stone, 2 park rangers, a forensic specialist, and a photographer to document whatever they might find. The journey to the drone-identified location took nearly 4 hours of careful hiking through some of the most challenging terrain in the region. The team had to rope down a steep cliff face and cross a fast-moving stream that wasn't marked on any official maps. The remoteness of the location explained why previous search efforts had never reached this area, despite the massive scope of the original investigation. When the ground team finally reached the clearing, they found a scene that had been frozen in time for nearly 3 years. A blue camping tent was partially collapsed under the weight of fallen branches and forest debris. The tent's fabric was faded and torn in several places, but it was clearly the shelter that the Brennan triplets had carried with them on their final camping trip. The site confirmed everyone's worst fears while simultaneously providing the first concrete evidence of the brothers' fate. The area around the tent was carefully photographed and documented before any items were disturbed. The forensic specialist noted that the campsite appeared to have been abandoned suddenly, with personal belongings scattered around the tent and no signs of an organized departure. A camping stove sat beside a cold fire ring, and fishing equipment was arranged as if the brothers had been preparing for a morning of angling when something interrupted their plans. Inside the collapsed tent, investigators found sleeping bags, personal clothing, and other camping gear that belonged to the triplets. The items were in various states of decay after 3 years of exposure to mountain weather, but they provided definitive proof that Jake, Luke, and Cole Brennan had reached this remote location. However, the brothers themselves were nowhere to be found, deepening the mystery of their disappearance. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. How had the triplets traveled 6 miles from their intended destination to this remote clearing? Why had they abandoned their campsite and all their equipment? Most importantly, where were they now? The tent and its contents suggested they had been at this location for at least 1 night, but there were no obvious clues about what had happened next. Deputy Stone immediately called the command post to report the discovery, and within hours, additional personnel were hiking toward the remote campsite. The Brennan family was informed of the finding, and Linda Brennan's reaction was a mixture of relief at finally having some answers and renewed anguish at the confirmation that something terrible had happened to her sons. The campsite was treated as a potential crime scene, though there were no obvious signs of violence or struggle. Every item was carefully cataloged and photographed before being removed for further analysis. The forensic team searched the surrounding area for any additional clues, including possible grave sites or evidence of what direction the brothers might have traveled when they left their camp. As news of the discovery spread, media attention returned to the Brennan case with renewed intensity. The drone technology that had made the discovery possible was hailed as a breakthrough in search and rescue operations, while the mystery of what had happened to the triplets after they abandoned their campsite captured public imagination. The story of 3 identical brothers who had vanished without a trace had taken another unexpected turn, bringing both answers and new questions to a case that had puzzled investigators for years. The forensic analysis of the abandoned campsite began immediately, with every piece of evidence carefully transported to the state crime laboratory in Helena. The tent and its contents were examined for fingerprints, DNA evidence, and any clues that might explain why the Brennan triplets had left their shelter and disappeared into the wilderness. The condition of the items suggested they had been exposed to the elements for the entire 3 years since the brothers' disappearance, making the investigation more challenging but not impossible. Dr. Patricia Wells, the state's chief forensic analyst, led the examination of the recovered materials. Her initial assessment confirmed that the camping equipment belonged to the missing triplets, with serial numbers matching items on the gear list their parents had provided to investigators. The sleeping bags contained hair samples that DNA testing would later confirm belonged to Jake, Luke, and Cole Brennan. However, the forensic evidence raised disturbing questions about the timeline of events. The arrangement of items inside the tent suggested the brothers had been sleeping when something caused them to leave quickly. The sleeping bags were unzipped and pushed aside, as if the occupants had gotten up suddenly during the night. Personal items like wallets, watches, and medications were left behind, indicating the brothers hadn't planned to be away from their campsite for an extended period. Most puzzling was the discovery of 3 pairs of hiking boots lined up neatly outside the tent entrance, suggesting the brothers had left their campsite barefoot or in socks. Deputy Stone returned to the remote campsite with a larger investigative team, including cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar equipment. The expanded search focused on the area immediately surrounding the tent, looking for any signs of where the brothers might have gone after abandoning their shelter. The terrain around the campsite was treacherous, with steep drops, dense vegetation, and rocky outcroppings that could easily conceal evidence or pose dangers to inexperienced hikers. The cadaver dogs showed interest in several areas near the campsite but failed to locate any human remains. The handlers noted that 3 years of weather exposure could have dispersed scent trails beyond the dogs' ability to detect them. Ground-penetrating radar scans of the surrounding area revealed no buried objects or disturbed soil that might indicate grave sites. The search expanded in concentric circles from the tent location, but no additional evidence was discovered. Analysis of the campsite's location revealed why it had remained hidden for so long. The clearing was situated in a natural depression surrounded by tall pine trees, making it invisible from aerial searches. The terrain leading to the site was so difficult that even experienced hikers would be unlikely to stumble upon it accidentally. The brothers had either discovered this location through careful exploration or had been led there by someone familiar with the area. Weather records from July 2015 showed that the region had experienced several severe thunderstorms during the period when the triplets were camping. One particularly intense storm had occurred on July 18, 3 days after the brothers had begun their trip. Investigators theorized that the storm might have forced the triplets to seek shelter in the remote clearing, where they had set up their tent and waited for conditions to improve. The discovery of the abandoned campsite prompted a renewed search for the missing brothers, focusing on areas within walking distance of the tent location. Search teams explored every ravine, creek bed, and potential shelter within a 5-mile radius. The theory was that the brothers had left their campsite for some reason and had become lost or injured while trying to return. However, after 2 weeks of intensive searching, no trace of the triplets was found. Linda Brennan visited the campsite location once the forensic team had completed their work. The hike to reach the remote clearing was physically demanding, and she required assistance from park rangers to navigate the difficult terrain. Standing in the place where her sons had spent their final known hours, she felt a mixture of closure and renewed grief. The discovery of the tent confirmed that something had happened to her boys, but it didn't answer the fundamental question of where they were now. The investigation expanded to include interviews with anyone who might have been in the area during July 2015. Park rangers, hunting guides, and local residents were questioned about unusual activities or sightings during that time period. Several people reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles on remote forest roads, but none of the descriptions could be definitively linked to the Brennan case. The vast wilderness area made it impossible to track every person who might have been camping or hiking during the relevant time frame. One intriguing lead emerged from a retired Forest Service employee named Walter Kowalski, who had been conducting an unofficial wildlife survey in the region during summer 2015. Kowalski reported seeing 3 young men matching the triplets' description near a creek about 2 miles from the discovered campsite. According to his account, the men appeared to be following someone else, though he couldn't see who was leading them. The sighting had occurred during daylight hours, and the men seemed calm and unhurried. Kowalski's testimony was significant because it suggested the brothers had left their campsite voluntarily and were following someone they trusted. This contradicted theories that they had fled their tent in panic or had become lost while exploring the area. The witness description placed the sighting on July 19, which would have been the day before the triplets were scheduled to return home. However, Kowalski admitted he hadn't thought the encounter was significant at the time and hadn't reported it during the original investigation. The possibility that the brothers had encountered another person in the wilderness opened new avenues of investigation. Detectives began researching individuals who were known to frequent the remote areas of Glacier National Park, including hermits, illegal hunters, and people seeking to avoid contact with authorities. The investigation revealed that several individuals lived off the grid in the region, surviving by hunting, fishing, and avoiding detection by park rangers. One name that emerged during this phase of the investigation was Marcus Thornfield, a 45-year-old former military veteran who had been living in the wilderness for over a decade. Thornfield had been arrested several times for illegal camping and hunting violations, but he had always managed to disappear back into the forest before authorities could prosecute him effectively. Rangers described him as intelligent, resourceful, and potentially dangerous when cornered. Efforts to locate Thornfield proved unsuccessful, as he had no permanent address and moved frequently throughout the vast wilderness area. His last known contact with authorities had been in 2014, when he had been cited for illegal camping near Bowman Lake. Since then, he had effectively vanished, though occasional reports suggested he was still living somewhere in the remote regions of the park. The investigation into Thornfield's background revealed a troubled individual who had struggled to readjust to civilian life after military service. He had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and had a history of avoiding contact with other people. However, there was no evidence linking him directly to the Brennan triplets' disappearance, and his involvement remained purely speculative. As autumn 2018 approached, the investigation had reached another frustrating impasse. The discovery of the abandoned campsite had provided crucial evidence about the brothers' final days, but it had not revealed their ultimate fate. The tent and its contents were stored in the evidence facility, silent witnesses to a mystery that continued to baffle investigators and torment the Brennan family. The case had evolved from a simple missing persons investigation into something far more complex and disturbing. 3 young men had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an abandoned tent and more questions than answers. The wilderness that had claimed them remained silent, keeping its secrets hidden among the towering pines and rocky peaks of Montana's most remote regions. The winter of 2018 brought a temporary halt to active search efforts, but the investigation continued in other ways. Deputy Stone spent countless hours reviewing the case files, studying maps, and following up on every lead that had emerged since the discovery of the abandoned campsite. The forensic evidence had been thoroughly analyzed, witness statements had been verified, and every possible theory had been explored. Yet the fundamental question remained unanswered. What had happened to Jake, Luke, and Cole Brennan after they left their tent in that remote clearing? In February 2019, an unexpected break came from an unlikely source. A graduate student at the University of Montana named Jennifer Hayes was conducting research on historical land use patterns in Glacier National Park when she discovered references to an old mining operation that had been active in the early 1900s. The mining claims were located in the same general area where the Triplets campsite had been found, and Hayes found records indicating that several mine shafts and tunnels still existed in the region. The historical records revealed that the Copper Creek Mining Company had operated in the area from 1902 to 1918, extracting copper and silver from underground deposits. When the operation became unprofitable, the company had abandoned the site without properly sealing all the mine entrances. Over the decades, many of these openings had become hidden by vegetation and natural erosion, creating potential hazards for anyone exploring the area. Deputy Stone immediately recognized the significance of this discovery. Mine shafts could easily explain how 3 people could disappear without a trace, especially if they had fallen into an opening that was concealed by vegetation or debris. She organized a specialized team that included mine safety experts and cave rescue specialists to search for any abandoned mine entrances in the vicinity of the campsite. The search for mine openings proved to be extremely challenging due to the terrain and the passage of time since the mining operation had ceased. Many potential entrances were completely overgrown or had collapsed decades earlier. However, after 3 days of careful exploration, the team discovered a partially concealed mine shaft approximately 1 mile from where the tent had been found. The opening was hidden beneath fallen logs and thick vegetation, making it nearly invisible to casual observation. The mine shaft descended at a steep angle into the mountainside, with wooden support beams that had rotted and collapsed in several places. The opening was large enough for a person to fall through, especially in darkness or poor weather conditions. Mine safety experts determined that the shaft was extremely dangerous, with unstable walls and the potential for toxic gases that had accumulated over the decades since the mine's abandonment. A specialized cave rescue team was brought in to explore the mine shaft safely. Using ropes, breathing apparatus, and powerful lighting equipment, they descended into the underground passages that extended deep into the mountain. The mine consisted of multiple tunnels and chambers, some of which had partially collapsed over the years. The rescue team worked methodically, searching every accessible area for any sign of the missing triplets. On the second day of the underground search, the rescue team made a discovery that would finally provide answers to the Brennan family's 3-year ordeal. In a chamber approximately 200 feet below the surface, they found human remains along with personal items that belonged to the missing brothers. The condition of the remains and the items suggested that the triplets had fallen into the mine shaft and had been unable to escape from the underground passages. The recovery operation took several days due to the dangerous conditions and the need to preserve evidence for the investigation. Each item was carefully documented and photographed before being removed from the mine. The personal effects included wallets, jewelry, and clothing that definitively identified the remains as belonging to Jake, Luke, and Cole Brennan. The discovery brought an end to one of Montana's most puzzling missing persons cases, though it also brought profound grief to the family that had never stopped hoping for their son's safe return. The investigation concluded that the triplets had likely left their campsite during the night, possibly to investigate a noise or to answer a call of nature, and had accidentally fallen into the concealed mine shaft. The darkness and unfamiliar terrain would have made it impossible for them to see the hidden danger until it was too late. Once underground, they would have been trapped in the maze of tunnels with no way to signal for help or find their way back to the surface. Linda Brennan received the news with a mixture of devastating grief and relief that the uncertainty was finally over. After 3 years of not knowing what had happened to her sons, she could finally begin the process of grieving and healing. The discovery provided the closure that the family had desperately needed, even though the answers came in the form of tragedy rather than the miracle they had hoped for. The Brennan case prompted significant changes in how search and rescue operations are conducted in Montana's wilderness areas. The use of drone technology became standard practice for missing persons investigations, and historical research into potential hazards like abandoned mines became a routine part of search planning. The case also led to efforts to identify and properly mark dangerous mine openings throughout the state's public lands. A memorial service for the triplets was held in Billings, attended by hundreds of people who had been touched by the family's ordeal and the community's response to the tragedy. The brothers were remembered not just as victims of a terrible accident, but as young men who had lived their lives with joy, adventure, and an unbreakable bond with each other. Their story became a reminder of both the beauty and the hidden dangers of Montana's wilderness areas. The auto repair shop that had remained closed since the brothers' disappearance was finally reopened as a memorial garage, with proceeds supporting search and rescue operations throughout the state. Tom Brennan returned to work, finding solace in maintaining the business that his sons had helped him build. The shop became a gathering place for the community, where people could share memories of the triplets and support the family's ongoing healing process. Deputy Rebecca Stone, who had never given up on finding answers, was promoted to detective in recognition of her dedication to the case. She continued to work missing persons investigations, bringing the lessons learned from the Brennan case to help other families facing similar ordeals. The case remained a defining moment in her career, demonstrating the importance of persistence, new technology, and thorough investigation in solving even the most puzzling disappearances. The mine shaft where the triplets were found was permanently sealed to prevent future accidents, and warning signs were posted throughout the area to alert hikers to the potential dangers of abandoned mining operations. The remote campsite where their tent had been discovered became an unofficial memorial, visited by family members and friends who wanted to remember the brothers in the place where they had spent their final days together. The Brennan Triplets story serves as a sobering reminder that even experienced outdoorsmen can encounter unexpected dangers in the wilderness. Their disappearance and eventual discovery highlighted the importance of proper safety precautions, emergency communication devices, and the value of letting others know exact travel plans when venturing into remote areas. Most importantly, their story demonstrated the power of family love, community support, and the determination to never give up hope, even in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances. The case officially closed in 2019, but the impact of the Brennan Triplets story continues to resonate throughout Montana and beyond. Their memory lives on in the improved search and rescue procedures that their case helped develop, in the family and friends who will never forget them, and in the reminder that every person who ventures into the wilderness carries with them the hopes and fears of those who love them. The mountains of Montana keep many secrets, but sometimes with persistence, technology, and a little luck, those secrets can finally be revealed, bringing peace to those left behind.